Her voice cut through the noise of the grocery store like a blade. "You're making things worse, Ruth. Don't call here again." Click. Silence. My phone still buzzed in my hand as a bag of oranges rolled off the counter and burst across the floor. People turned to stare. I stood frozen, cheeks burning, heart pounding in my ears. All I had done was ask why my grandson, Owen, had bruises on his wrists. "You're not his mother. Stay out of it." Those words hissed through my memory like acid. I bent down, gathering the fallen fruit, blinking against tears. I paid for the groceries without even knowing what was in my cart. Outside, the November rain hit my face, sharp and cold. I leaned against the shopping cart, whispering to no one, "What are you hiding, Megan?" Owen used to hold my arm so gently when we crossed the street. His little hand, warm, trusting. But yesterday, it was ice. Tight. Afraid. That's when I knew something in that house wasn't right. And if I stayed silent, I'd be betraying my own blood. Welcome to Life Voices, where family drama turns into late-life justice. If you're watching, tell us your city in the comments. We always read them. Before that day, I truly believed Megan was doing her best. After my son, Daniel, died in that highway crash, my whole world tilted. He'd been only 34. One moment he was laughing on the phone with me, saying, "Mom, don't worry, I'll be home for dinner," and the next, there was a knock at the door and 2 officers standing there, hats in their hands. Megan was 29 then, left with a 3-year-old and grief that turned her eyes hollow. I remember holding her hand at the funeral, promising silently to Daniel's grave that I'd help her, no matter what. I thought maybe love could patch what death had torn apart. For a while, it seemed to work. Every Friday, I'd make chicken and rice, Daniel's favorite, and invite them over. Owen would sit on my lap, smearing ketchup on my sleeve, while Megan smiled politely from across the table. She'd always check her phone, though, her fingers twitching like she couldn't wait to leave. Still, I told myself not to judge. People grieve in their own ways. When she met Evan, I was hopeful. God help me, I was. He was charming, with that too wide smile and the kind of politeness that feels rehearsed. "A strong figure for Owen," Megan said. "Someone steady." I wanted to believe her. After all, what little boy doesn't need a father figure? But over time, the visits became rarer. Phone calls unanswered, my offers to help, brushed aside. "He's busy with work," she'd say. Or, "Owen's tired." Then the stories started not to match. One week she said Owen had fallen off his bike. The next, she mentioned a bad tumble at the playground. I remember holding his wrist once when he reached for a cookie, thin bruises like finger marks. He snatched his hand back and said, "Mom says not to make you worry." Something in me twisted. That night, I prayed. I sat by Daniel's old photo, the one from his college graduation, his arms slung around my shoulders, both of us laughing. "If you're watching," I whispered, "help me see the truth. Help me protect your boy." A week later, Megan showed up at my door, hair frizzy, face pale. "Just for one night, Ruth," she said, pushing Owen forward. "I've got a late shift." But she didn't meet my eyes. Her hands trembled as she adjusted his jacket, and when she turned to leave, she kept glancing toward the street, as if someone was watching. Owen was quieter than usual that evening. He sat on the rug, moving his little toy robot back and forth but never making the beeping sounds he usually did. I tried to make him laugh, tickled his neck, but he only smiled weakly. At dinner, he barely touched his soup. His spoon clinked against the bowl, slow, distracted. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "you're not hungry?" He shook his head. "Mom says I can't eat too slow." Later, when I tucked him into bed, he curled up tight, clutching that robot. His eyelids fluttered, and he mumbled something, so faint I thought I'd imagined it. "Don't make me go in the little room." I froze. "What little room, darling?" I whispered, brushing his hair from his forehead. But his breathing had already deepened. He was asleep, or pretending to be. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying those words, the little room. At 3 in the morning, I got up and walked past his open door. The soft red light of the robot glowed on his blanket like a watchful eye. The next morning, as I flipped eggs on the skillet, Owen padded into the kitchen in his pajamas. He climbed onto the chair, swinging his legs. "Grandma," he said suddenly, "Mom told me not to tell you." My hand stopped midair, spatula trembling. Tell me what, sweetheart? He bit his lip, eyes wide, then whispered, when I'm bad, Evan puts me in the closet under the stairs. I felt the world tilt. The pan hissed, the smell of burning butter filled the air, but I couldn't move. In the dark? I asked quietly. He nodded, his voice barely a breath. With the light off. And he locks it, but I'm not supposed to tell. My knees gave out, and I sat down beside him, pulling him close. His small shoulders trembled. Honey, I whispered, no one should ever lock you in a closet. That's not punishment. That's wrong. He looked up at me, confused, scared. Mom says it's because I don't listen. I wanted to cry, scream, run to the police right that second. But instead, I stroked his hair, my mind racing. How do you confront a mother who's broken and a man who hides behind discipline? That morning changed everything. The next time I saw Megan, I would no longer smile and pretend. I would no longer believe the lies. I just didn't know yet how deep they went, or how much danger my silence had already caused. All that day I tried to convince myself that Owen was mistaken. Maybe he'd misunderstood something. Maybe the little room was just a corner, a silly timeout spot. I told myself children imagine things, they mix dreams with memories. But deep down, a voice whispered, "You know better, Ruth. You've seen those bruises." 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Owen's teacher, Ms. Reed, a kind, careful woman with gentle eyes. "Mrs. Carter, could you stop by the school?" she asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "It's about Owen." When I arrived, she led me into her small office, walls covered with drawings and spelling charts. "I didn't want to alarm you," she began, "but Owen's been jumpy lately. Startles at sudden sounds. Yesterday he drew a picture of a little boy inside a box with no windows." My throat went dry. "He said it's his thinking room," she continued. I asked who told him to go there, and he said, "Evan." She hesitated. The school nurse noticed faint marks near his wrists, like pressure from straps. For a moment, the air disappeared. I could hear only my own heartbeat. That night, I sat in my living room long after sunset, the house dim except for the small lamp by the sofa. Owen was asleep in the guest room. Megan had dropped him off again, saying she and Evan were working things out. She smiled when she said it, but her hands shook as she passed me his overnight bag. I reached for the toy robot he always carried and turned it over in my palm. It had a red button on the back, one I'd never noticed before. I pressed it. At first, just static. Then a man's voice, harsh, low. "Cry all you want. You'll learn fast in the dark." Then came Owen's sob, a small, trembling sound that sliced through my chest. I dropped the toy. It clattered on the floor, echoing through the quiet house. I sat there for a long time, trembling, replaying the sound in my head. Finally, I picked it up, pressed the button again. Same words, same sob. There was no mistake. It wasn't imagination. It was proof. The next morning, I went straight to the police station. My hands shook as I placed the toy on the counter. The officer on duty, young, polite, and tired, listened halfway, nodding with that look people give to the elderly when they're trying to be kind. "Ma'am, do you have any direct evidence? Anyone else who's witnessed this?" "I have the recording," I said, my voice trembling. He pressed the button. The robot hissed static, then silence. The file had somehow been erased. He sighed. "It's not uncommon for kids to exaggerate. I'm sure everything's fine at home. But we'll keep a note on file." A note on file. I walked out shaking. The wind cut through my coat, but the real cold was inside me. By Saturday, the rumors had already begun. Megan called me, her voice full of venom. "What the hell did you tell the police? You're sick, Ruth. You need help. Everyone says you can't let go of Daniel." I tried to speak, but she hung up. By evening, Mrs. Porter from next door came to return a pie dish. Her eyes darted away from mine. "Megan said you've been confused lately." Poor thing, grief can do that. That was when I realized I was being painted as unstable, a lonely old woman who saw ghosts in shadows. At church the next morning, even Father Lewis avoided my eyes. People whispered as I passed. My heart sank, heavy as a stone. But that night, as I sat on the porch, something unexpected happened. My neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, the quiet man from across the street, walked over holding his phone. Ms. Carter, he said gently, I think you should see this. He showed me footage from his Ring doorbell camera. The timestamp read 12:07 a.m. The video was grainy, but clear enough. Evan, dragging Owen by the arm toward the house. The boy was barefoot, wearing only pajamas. He was crying, resisting. Then, click. A metallic sound, like a latch snapping shut. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mr. Alvarez looked at me with pity. I didn't know what to do. But I thought you should have it. I took the phone in both hands, watching the clip again and again, my heart hammering. There was no more doubt. The truth was right there, in shaky pixels and a child's cry. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the video open, staring at that final frame, Owen disappearing behind the door. The small porch light flickered, then went dark. By dawn, I'd made my decision. For too long I'd been afraid of being wrong. Afraid of losing what little family I had left. But fear had already cost too much. This time, I would not whisper. This time, I would be heard. At sunrise, I made a pot of coffee strong enough to keep my hands from shaking and set the little robot and my phone beside me on the kitchen table. Outside, frost dusted the grass like powdered sugar, the world still and silent, as if waiting. I watched the clock tick toward 8, the moment the police station would open. When I walked in, I wasn't the confused old woman from before. I was a grandmother with proof, and fire in her chest. I have evidence, I said to the same officer who'd brushed me off days ago. My voice didn't tremble this time. I slid Mr. Alvarez's phone across the counter. Watch this. He watched. His jaw tightened as the footage played, Evan's hand clamping around Owen's small arm, the boy's sob echoing faintly, the metallic snap of the lock. For once, there was no polite smile. He stood up and disappeared through a door. Minutes later, 2 more officers joined him. They replayed the video 3 times, zooming in, whispering between themselves. One of them turned to me. We'll need that robot, ma'am. And we'll be contacting Child Protective Services immediately. I felt my knees weaken, relief and terror mixing in my veins. Please, I said softly, just get him out of that house. Within an hour, patrol cars rolled toward Megan's townhouse. I followed in my old sedan, heart hammering. The blue lights reflected off every window as neighbors peeked through blinds. Megan's car was in the driveway. I saw her standing on the porch, wrapped in a robe, eyes wide as officers surrounded the door. When they went inside, time seemed to slow. The street held its breath. Then came the shout, "We found it." I pushed past the tape before anyone could stop me. The door under the stairs was half open, a sour smell of bleach seeping out. Inside was a blanket, a bucket, and on the wall, taped paper, lines scrawled in thick black marker. Punishments. My stomach turned as I read the words, no talking back 10 minutes. Crying 20 minutes. Lying 1 hour. Evan stood by the kitchen sink, cuffed, eyes cold, like he still thought he could talk his way out of this. You don't understand, he said to the officers. It's discipline. Boys need structure. Megan fell to her knees beside the doorway, shaking, tears streaming down her face. He told me it was just a lesson, she cried. He said it would make Owen strong. I didn't know, God, I didn't know. I looked at her, at the woman I had once held like a daughter, the one my son had loved. My voice came out low, steady. No, Megan, you knew. You just didn't want to see. She covered her face and sobbed. When they carried Evan out, Owen clung to an officer's hand, small and silent. His eyes found mine. For a second he didn't move. Then he ran, arms outstretched, straight into me. I caught him, pressed his shaking body against my chest, and felt the weight of every sleepless night lift, if only a little. It's over, baby, I whispered into his hair. No one's putting you in the dark again. He nodded against my shoulder but didn't speak. He didn't need to. That evening, Child Protective Services came to my house. They asked questions, filled out forms. I answered everything I could, voice raw from crying. At last, the caseworker, a woman with kind eyes, said gently, Mrs. Carter, until the court makes a final decision, Owen will stay with you. Stay with me. I wanted to collapse from gratitude. I brewed cocoa, warmed milk the way Daniel used to like it, and tucked Owen into the same bed his father had once slept in as a boy. He held his robot on the blanket, thumb resting on the red button. Can it still talk, Grandma? He asked. I hesitated, then smiled. Not like before, sweetheart. But maybe it can learn new things. He pressed the button. The recorder clicked and word, empty. Then I leaned close and whispered, "Good night, Owen. You're safe." When he played it back, that's all it said, just my voice, warm and calm. He smiled for the first time in weeks. After he fell asleep, I stood in the doorway watching his chest rise and fall. The house was quiet except for the hum of the heater and the faint rain outside. My heart hurt, but it was a clean hurt, the kind that comes when truth finally replaces denial. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table again, phone buzzing with news alerts. Local man arrested for child abuse and unlawful imprisonment. Community shocked. Police commend grandmother's persistence. I didn't feel heroic, just tired, but finally at peace. The next morning, when Owen woke, the first thing he did was open the curtains. Sunlight flooded the room. He blinked, smiled, and said, "Grandma, it's bright." "Yes, sweetheart," I said, kissing his forehead. "That's how it's supposed to be." He still sleeps with that robot on his nightstand. But now, when it records, it captures laughter, stories, small songs about monsters turning into clouds. He's learning, slowly, that doors are meant to open, not lock. Sometimes he asks, "Does Mom still love me?" I pull him close and answer, "She does, honey. But love isn't enough unless it protects you." He thinks about that, nodding like a tiny old man, then goes back to his toys. In me, I've learned something too. That silence is not kindness. That peace built on fear is not peace, it's surrender. If a child ever whispers something that chills your blood, listen. Always listen, because sometimes a whisper is the only cry they have left. A month has passed since that day, the day blue lights flashed across Megan's street, the day I learned how much courage costs. The court granted me temporary custody of Owen. The judge said it so plainly, almost coldly, but to me it felt like someone had handed me back a piece of my own heart. Now our mornings have a rhythm again, though everything feels slower, quieter. Owen wakes up before me most days, padding into the kitchen in his socks, hair sticking up in soft curls. He climbs onto the stool and asks, "Can I stir the pancakes?" I hand him the whisk, pretending not to notice that he still glances toward the doorway every few minutes, like he's checking who's coming. I never raise my voice. If the milk spills or the eggs burn, I just smile. "It's all right, sweetheart," I tell him, wiping his fingers clean. Nothing's wrong. Sometimes he looks surprised, like he's waiting for the punishment that doesn't come. It breaks my heart each time. At night, he still insists on keeping the lamp on. "Dark makes my stomach hurt," he says softly. So I leave the light glowing and sit beside him until his breathing steadies. The first few nights, he couldn't fall asleep without the sound of the robot beside him. I taught him to record new things, our voices reading bedtime stories, his giggles when I make silly faces, the chirping of the crickets outside. It's strange how healing hides in small things. Megan calls sometimes, from the rehabilitation center. The first time, I almost didn't answer. My hand hovered over the phone, heart twisting with anger and pity. When I finally picked up, her voice was small, hoarse. "How is he?" she asked. "He's safe," I said simply. She started crying. I thought I was doing what Evan wanted. He said I was too soft. Said I'd ruin him if I didn't let him learn discipline. I didn't see what was happening, Ruth. I swear. I closed my eyes. "You saw enough to know it hurt him. You just didn't want to lose another man." She didn't deny it, just silence, broken by her quiet sobs. Before hanging up, she whispered, "Tell him I love him." "I will," I said. "But love isn't enough anymore, Megan. You'll have to prove it when you come back." Afterward, I sat at the table, staring at the phone. Part of me still wanted to comfort her, to say it wasn't all her fault. But another part, the stronger part, remembered Owen's bruises, his whisper in the dark. "Don't make me go in the little room." And I knew forgiveness would have to wait. Owen's teacher, Ms. Reed, calls often too. She says he's doing better at school, draws sunny pictures now, people with smiles instead of blank faces. She told me he stood up in class and said, "My grandma says doors are supposed to open." The whole class clapped. When she told me that, I had to turn away, pretending to look for something in my purse so she wouldn't see the tears in my eyes. On weekends, we visit the park. He runs toward the swings, laughter echoing like music I thought I'd forgotten. Sometimes, when I push him, I catch sight of Daniel in his grin, the same spark, the same fearless tilt of the head. And in those moments, I thank God I didn't stay silent. But healing isn't a straight road. There are nights when he wakes screaming, eyes wide, drenched in sweat. I rush to him, hold him close, whisper that he's safe. He clings to me, shaking, until his breathing slows. I never ask what he dreamed. I already know. We see a therapist every Thursday. A gentle man named Dr. Benson. He says healing takes time, that Owen is learning trust again. He looks at me sometimes and says, "You did the hardest part, Mrs. Carter." You believed him. I nod, but the truth is, I still feel the guilt creeping in. Why didn't I act sooner? Why did I wait until the proof was undeniable? Sometimes, when Owen is playing in the yard, I stand by the window and think about all the grandparents who might be seeing signs but are too afraid to speak. Afraid of being called crazy, dramatic, meddling. Afraid of losing their family. I know that fear too well. It's a cage made of love and silence. If only they knew how small that fear looks next to the sight of a child finally smiling without flinching. One evening, Owen and I were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in orange and violet. He leaned against me and asked, "Grandma, are monsters real?" I thought for a moment. "Yes," I said softly. "But they don't live under beds or in closets. They hide in people who forget how to love." He nodded thoughtfully, then pressed the red button on his robot. "Say that again," he said. I smiled and repeated it into the recorder. When he played it back, he grinned. "I like your voice, Grandma. It makes me not scared." That night, after he fell asleep, I sat by his door for a long while, just listening to the quiet hum of the house, the kind of silence that feels safe. Tomorrow, the court will decide if I can keep permanent custody. I don't know what they'll rule. But I know one thing. I will fight for him until my last breath. Because being a grandmother isn't just about baking cookies and birthday cards. Sometimes it's about standing between a child and the darkness, and refusing to move. The hearing came quicker than I expected. That morning, I dressed carefully, a pressed blouse, Daniel's old locket around my neck. Inside it, a picture of him holding newborn Owen. I wanted the judge to see that this wasn't just a case. This was blood, love, and the promise I'd made the day that child came into the world. Owen sat beside me in the waiting area, clutching his robot. His legs swung from the chair, not quite reaching the floor. He whispered, "Grandma, will they make me go back?" "No, sweetheart," I said softly, taking his hand. "Not while I'm here." When they called our names, my heart felt too big for my chest. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant. Megan sat at the other table, thinner now, her face pale but sober. She wore a plain dress, her hands folded, knuckles white. For a second, our eyes met. There was shame in hers, and fear. The judge, a gray-haired woman with glasses perched low on her nose, read through the reports. The photos, the police statements, the psychologist's notes. I kept my hands clasped tight in my lap, my pulse drumming so loud I barely heard the legal words spinning around us. When it was my turn to speak, I stood. "Your Honor," I began, my voice trembling, "I'm not here to take a child away from his mother. I'm here to keep him safe. My son, his father, died thinking his boy would grow up loved. I can't let that promise die with him." The judge nodded, her eyes softening. "We understand, Mrs. Carter. Please, continue." So I told her everything. About the bruises, the whispers, the robot's recording, the night I found the little room. The way Owen flinched at sudden noises, how he still checked every lock twice before bed. When I finished, the courtroom was quiet. Megan wiped her eyes, staring at her folded hands. Her lawyer nudged her gently, and she stood too. "Your Honor," she said, her voice cracking, "I failed my son. I was scared of Evan, of being alone, of being judged. I let fear blind me. But I'm getting help now. I'm learning." I wanted to be angry, but something inside me softened. She was broken, yes, but maybe not beyond repair. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Carter, Ms. Carter, I've seen many cases like this. Pain runs deep, but what matters now is healing. The court finds that Owen Carter shall remain in the temporary custody of his grandmother, Ruth Carter, pending review in 6 months. During that time, supervised visitation for the mother will be arranged. I felt my knees wobble. The words shall remain echoed in my chest like a prayer answered. Afterward, outside the courthouse, Megan approached me. For a long moment we stood there, just two women tied by the same love and the same mistakes. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for saving him and me." I looked at her, the girl who once laughed in my kitchen, the widow who lost her way, and said, "Get better, Megan. That's how you can thank me. Be the mother he deserves when you're ready." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Can I hug him?" Owen stood between us, unsure. I knelt down beside him. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mom just wants a hug." He hesitated, then took a small step forward. She knelt, arms shaking, and when she wrapped him up, I saw the tremor in her shoulders, not from anger, but from guilt. "I love you, baby," she whispered. "I'm sorry." He didn't answer, only pressed his face against her shoulder for a second, then turned and ran to me. When she left, I watched her walk away, smaller somehow, but maybe freer too. That evening, Owen and I celebrated with pancakes for dinner. He poured the syrup himself, sticky and proud. "Did we win, Grandma?" he asked. I smiled. "We did, sweetheart. We won the truth." After he went to bed, I sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across the floor. I thought about Daniel, about how he'd always believed people could change, how he'd say, "Mom, even broken things can be mended if someone cares enough to try." Maybe he was right. Maybe Megan could find her way back. But even if she didn't, Owen had a home. A real one. Weeks passed, and our life settled into something gentle. School, therapy, dinners filled with laughter instead of tension. Every day, Owen grew a little bolder. One afternoon, he ran through the yard chasing butterflies, shouting, "I'm faster than my shadow." I laughed until my sides hurt. Later that night, I found him in bed, eyes half closed, whispering to his robot, "We don't have to hide anymore." I sat quietly in the doorway, tears warm on my cheeks. Because he was right. The monsters were gone, and in their place was something stronger than fear, the stubborn, ordinary miracle of love that refuses to give up. Sometimes, I still wonder how close I came to losing him. How easily silence could have swallowed his story. And that thought keeps me awake just long enough to whisper one more promise into the dark. Never again. Because peace isn't something you keep by staying quiet. It's something you fight for, one whisper, one truth, one child at a time. It's been half a year now. 6 months of mornings that smell like cinnamon toast instead of fear. 6 months of laughter echoing through rooms that used to feel too quiet. Sometimes I catch myself just standing in the doorway, watching Owen as he builds little towers of blocks, humming under his breath. Every now and then, he looks up and smiles as if to make sure I'm still there. And I always am. The court review is in a few weeks, but I'm not as nervous this time. Owen's teacher says he's doing wonderfully. He's made friends, joined a little soccer group, and even volunteered to be the line leader in class. When she told me, I had to bite my lip not to cry. There was a time when he couldn't even walk into a room without flinching at every sound. We've made small rituals together. Pancakes every Sunday, evening walks around the block where we race to the mailbox and back. On rainy days, we sit on the couch under a blanket and read his father's old books, picture stories Daniel once loved. I show him the pages where his dad scribbled crayon marks as a boy, and Owen always laughs. "He was messy like me," he says. "Yes," I tell him, brushing his hair aside. "Just like you." He keeps that robot on his nightstand still, though now it plays new sounds, his favorite songs, our laughter, sometimes just my voice saying good night. The red light blinks softly in the dark, a quiet reminder that even after everything, hope can be recorded too. Megan visits once a week, always under supervision. The first few visits were awkward. Owen wouldn't speak to her much. He'd hide behind me, eyes wary. But she never pushed. She just sat on the rug, talking to him about school, showing him small things she made in therapy, paintings of bright skies, paper birds. One afternoon, he handed her a crayon and said, "You can draw with me if you want." I saw her lip tremble as she whispered, "I'd like that." It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was something close to it. I don't pretend everything is fine. Trauma leaves stains no soap can scrub. Sometimes Owen wakes in the middle of the night and comes to my room, curling up beside me, whispering, just until the morning. And every time, I lift the blanket and hold him close until his breathing steadies. I tell him that the dark isn't bad, it's just empty space waiting for light. He nods, half asleep, and murmurs, "Then you're the light, Grandma." There are moments I break too. When the house is quiet and I find one of his old drawings from before, all gray scribbles and tiny stick figures trapped in boxes. I sit there with that paper in my lap and whisper, "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, sweetheart." Guilt still sneaks in, no matter how much time passes. But I've learned that guilt, when faced honestly, can grow into something softer, determination. I've started volunteering at the local community center, helping with family outreach. I talk to other grandparents, other parents, anyone who'll listen. I tell them the signs to look for, how silence sounds, how fear hides in polite smiles and tidy excuses. And I always end with the same words: if a child tells you something that makes your heart stop, believe them. Some people nod, some cry, some look away, not ready to hear it yet. But even if one person listens, that's enough. The other day, I came home from the center and found Owen sitting on the porch steps, his robot beside him. "Grandma," he said, "when I grow up, I want to help kids too." My throat tightened. "That's a good dream, Owen." He smiled shyly. "You helped me, so I want to help somebody else." And just like that, I realized the circle was breaking, the pain, the silence, the fear. It was ending right there, in the hands of a boy who finally believed in light again. That night, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done since Daniel passed. I wrote, "Peace isn't quiet. Peace is the sound of a child's laughter where fear used to live." Then I closed the book and sat by the window, listening to the rain tapping softly against the glass. Tomorrow, the judge will likely make the custody permanent. Whatever happens, I'm ready. Because even if my time on this earth is shorter than his future, I know I've done what every mother and grandmother hopes to do. I've kept love alive in a place where darkness once lived. When I tuck Owen into bed tonight, I'll say it again, just like every night. "You're safe, my love." He'll smile sleepily, press the red button on his robot, and record it. And maybe one day, years from now, when I'm gone and he's grown, he'll press play and hear my voice whispering through the years. "You're safe. You're loved. Always." If you ever hear a whisper like that, don't ignore it. Sometimes it's not just memory speaking. Sometimes it's a reminder that love, when it dares to act, can save a life. Tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have spoken up? Or stayed silent to keep the peace? If this story hit you somewhere deep, don't just scroll away. Subscribe so you don't miss the next voice that refuses to stay silent. And tell me in the comments, would you have spoken up or stayed quiet to keep the peace? Your words might give courage to someone who's afraid to act right now. Let's make silence impossible, together.